Okay, so we talked about Google logins. And Google logins are nice because they're easy to use, but they're not always appropriate. In reality, they're probably rarely appropriate, so that's kind of funny. But we can do authentication via other means. So we talked about how to do it manually, right? You remember that sign up we stored in the database. Maybe we should just review that real quick. So how do we store users on a site if we're doing manual logins?
We look first at HMAC, then we look at Gorilla.
Yeah, so let's say manual logins. We have a form for sign up. That has, what does it have in it?
Username and password.
Username, password.
Usually email password.
Yeah, sometimes there's a difference, sometimes it's the same thing. We submit that form, and so what does it do when we submit the form?
Sends us the credentials. We then need to check those credentials against some data source.
Not for sign up.
Yeah, for sign up.
So
we
it's storing the username and password.
That's right.
And then
Except we don't usually store the password, right? Save in data store.
Well, store the salted and hash password.
Yeah.
And at that point, you probably want to authenticate, mark them as authenticated as that user, unless you want to verify email password.
Does everybody understand the salted and hash password?
Say a little bit more about that. Like I have a little bit of an idea. Like my understanding of hashing is taking something and turning it into a jumble, and salting is providing it with some sort of a unique little thing you're throwing into the mix to stir it up with that's different every time. So the salt might be a random number.
Yeah. So rather than store the password directly, we try to store the password essentially encrypted in a format that's not easily readable, except since it's a password, we don't actually care about getting the original back. And so what we do is we add some bit of random data to it and then hash that and store the hash in the database. And then when the user tries to log in, we repeat the process. We give that same bit of random data and the password they entered, hash it, and compare that to what's in the database. If they're the same, then the user entered the same password. But we don't actually store their password. We just store this hashed password. Okay?
The salt is random, but you say one over and over.
Yeah, you have to save it with the salt is random, so it changes for every user,
Okay.
but it's stored with the password.
And the reason salt's important is because then if we could see like we hacked and we saw the craziness that was stored, whatever the hash, and then I enter my email and I see, okay, my email turns into this jumbled characters, right? I know that this email turns into those jumbled characters, and that allows me to start reverse engineering it a little bit more, versus if my email plus some random thing which I don't know.
The reason they do it is if two users use the same password, which because people are really bad about passwords, they all use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or the word password, or they name it after the last name or some dumb thing like that. That means a lot of people reuse the same password. Because we're hashing the password, they'll all be the same. And so that tells you something. In other words, if I'm a hacker, I have a list of the most common passwords. I calculate the hashes of all of them and go look in the database. And if I find those hashes, I know what their password was, right? So even though I can't go, because I know that users use the same passwords, it gives me an advantage, right? And so by using salt, I'm making all those passwords different. And so it defeats that basic simple attack.
Is salt unique to each user, or do you just use, okay, so every user gets unique salt.
Yep.
Can we store that salt so that when they give it, that's the password, we can resalt?
You'd have like password salt and password hash as fields in the database.
Okay.
Though, you know, as an option, you certainly don't have to roll your own there. You can use Bcrypt, and this is in the X crypto. You can do this. So generate from password, generate returns the Bcrypt hash of a password at the given cost. And this is kind of funny, but this function is expensive. And so it's slow, it takes a while to calculate, and then you would store that. And so this you don't need to solve so much, but maybe you still have to. But anyway, you could use Bcrypt instead of SHA-1 or something. That's the idea. Why is it slow?
Because you want it to be difficult for somebody to try to generate the same hash for a password to test whether,
Yeah.
to look up all the passwords would be expensive.
Yeah, so you make it really hard to, and basically the way they made this expensive is it just calculates like SHA-1 or something over and over and over and over and over again, hundreds of times, to make it slower. And so that just makes it, the hacker's job, if he wants to compute all these hashes, much more difficult. He has to both guess the number of times you chose, and then he has to compute it that many times for each single. So calculating this once is not that pricey, right? But calculating it 1,000 times, that is going to take a while. And that's it. So it's easy for you, but it's hard for him. That's it. But anyway. So that's how we do it if we did it manually. There is a third option. Okay, so rather than storing users in our table with their passwords and all that, we can use a third-party authentication system. Okay? And this is increasingly common.
Caleb, you went through this earlier in the class? User password authentication or?
Yeah.
Okay.
This is
Kind of.
week 2, I think.
Yeah, I haven't.
I've got the files in GitHub.
Yeah, so we can sign up, save in the data store, and then store in their session,
Right.
their email or whatever. Okay, so the third option is third-party authentication. And there are many options here. Common options include Facebook or Twitter, Google, and you've probably seen them. You go to certain sites and you can sign up with, and they give you links to the third parties. And then you don't have to create a username and password. They just use your account on that other site. And so let's do one with GitHub. I think it's called Sign In. I'm trying to find them. Does anybody know where the not logo. There we go. So you create an application, and this would make it so that you could access data on GitHub via the API, but you can also log in as users on GitHub. So I'm trying to think of a site that uses this.
Gitter probably does.
What?
Gitter? G-I-T-T-E-R.
What is that?
Chat rooms for GitHub repositories.
Perfect. This button. That's weird. Are these like live people chatting?
I have no idea. Here's sign-ins.
So I say sign up for free with GitHub. I click that link, it brings me here. And it says public repo access by Gitter HQ would like permission to access your account. And then you list various things that you're allowed to do. I guess that's okay. And there's chatting. It's like Slack. Okay. So notice I didn't have to enter a username and password, right? Because it logged me in as GitHub. So that's not what I want. I'm just trying to find the docs. There we go. Web application flow. So the general thing here is known as OAuth, Open Authentication. It's OAuth 2. There was an OAuth 1, but nobody uses OAuth 1 anymore, so it's OAuth 2. And it's for third-party websites. And you redirect users to request GitHub access. So you redirect the user to this page, and you pass in a bunch of data, And then when they click accept, it redirects them back to this page. Sorry. Yeah, and then you'll get
to your page and you send them to that page.
right. And then you'll get back all this extra stuff, and you'll get a token, and that token allows you to access the API on the user's behalf to get data and stuff. Okay. So I could, for example, on GitHub, I could get the lists of repositories that's under that account. And so Gitter is doing some of that, allowing me to communicate. That's sad. So you could chat with your teammates on GitHub. We're using Gitter. That's kind of strange, but okay. So we want to add that. We want to build a site that does this, okay? That's what we would like to do. I think we have to sign up for a developer. Yeah, register an application, okay? Personal access. That's not good. Okay. So if you want to follow along, what we want to do is you go to github.com/settings, and down here is applications. So this is my settings on GitHub, github.com/settings/applications, and new. And we'll call this GitHub example 1. Now this URL should be, so this is going to be an example of an application that we have to deploy. We could work with it locally, but it doesn't work as well locally. It really has to be deployed. So what we're going to use is the app engine URL, okay? And that was, what was the name of it? Astute Curve. Astute Curve. So copy that. An example. And then the callback URL. So your application callback URL. So if we look at the OAuth docs, let's open that. Direct users to GitHub access. Redirect back to your site with a temporary code and a code parameter. Exchange it for an access token. So it's the site that they come back to. Okay. So a common form here is just to say OAuth to callback. So I just gave it the URL of my site. Oh, I forgot the slash. No, it's there. /OAuth to callback. Okay. And it will send them back to this URL along with a code. And we will swap out the code for a token and use that token to access the API. Okay. So let's see if it will let me do this. Cool. So I created an application. Everybody follow so far? And it has all this stuff. And I can delete it or whatever. And then it gave me this. So I will make sure to delete this application after we're done because that's a secret token that we just showed everybody. Okay, so we have our application. That was step 1. Step 2 is in the web application flow here is redirect users to request GitHub access. So we need to redirect them and hand it these query string parameters. Okay, the client ID, and that was this ID. The redirect URI, the URL and the app where users will be sent after authorization. That's that OAuth to callback URL. And the scope, we'll look at in a second, but that's basically the things you would like access to. So I want to see your repositories. You put that in the scope. That's what caused the little things to show up where it said, oh, I'll have access to read this. When you, for example, other places it shows up, if you're on your mobile phone, you install an application and it asks permissions of what it would like to be able to do. That's another kind of scope, right, for an API. So you'll give it that list, and then the state is just unguessable random string. What it'll do is you'll tack on the state, they'll come back, and you'll see if the state changed. If it's changed, then you'll deny the request. If it stays the same, then everything's great, okay? The reason why you do that is this forgery tags. We have not talked about this. XRSF tokens, cross-site forgery. To prevent that, the reason we do that is you can make an image with a source equal to this URL, and you're making a request on the user's behalf. So you put the image, you put this as the URL, it causes the stuff to happen, okay? And then you post that image on a message board somewhere, and anybody who reads that message in the message board, when they see that image, it causes this to happen on their browser. And so that's a cross-site request forgery attack. So anyway.
What do you mean by image there?
I mean like
Like a site image of all the code, or?
Like the
Okay,
image without
image tag.
tags.
that you put in the GitHub URL there.
Okay.
And when somebody just looks at the image, it makes that request, because that's how the web works, you know? And so you could make it withdraw money from a bank account or stuff. And so we use this kind of token, this generated random token, to defeat this attack. Because now if somebody puts the source in here, the token isn't going to be right. It's not going to be what we expected it to. Anyway, that's what this stays for. Those get really complicated. Technically, you should be adding to your form, to every single form on your site, and hidden input with a token inside of it. Okay, so let's do that part.
We just spend one more moment on the forgery tag. So the image tag, here to do a forgery tag, we put inside the image tag which URL, the URL to authorize.
It's not showing you, but what happens is after you say yes, accept, it redirects back to your page, to the OAuth2 callback,
Yeah.
and it'll have a bunch of parameters.
Oh, okay.
It'll have
Code state.
Okay.
code equal 1, 2, 3, 4, and whatever else it has, okay?
Okay.
If I set that as my image source, the site I'm using might think, oh, somebody just logged in. Okay? And
So
so,
made that request as image tags do for the source.
sorry, what?
And so the image tag makes that request for the source.
Exactly.
It's going to be an image, but it's just going to that URL.
Right, and then you might trick my site into doing something on behalf of the user. They might already be logged in or something.
Okay.
And so, like I said, you might make them do something. The classic example is I put bankofamerica.com/withdraw $100 and account equal and give it the account name. And if you're already logged into Bank of America, you view that image, bam, the money's withdrawn from your account and sent to this other account. They didn't hack into your account. They used the fact that by looking at an image and you're already logged in, it causes the action to happen.
Knowing what URL Bank of America
Yes.
uses and then sending it. Holy cow, do people actually do that?
Absolutely, it's
Does
a
it
very
still
common
work?
attack. No, not with Bank of America. There's two ways you defeat it. The first is that you use posts and never gets.
Uh-huh.
So you can't use the get.
Yeah.
So that makes the image thing a little harder, right? You
Yeah.
can't just do that. The other is you use the cross-site request forgery token. And so I add into this a token. That token's random and per user. I store it in their session, or I store it on the site and it's randomly generated every day or something like that. And then if I don't see that token or the token's wrong, I reject the request. I say that wasn't from the user clicking a button on the site. Because my buttons add that token, okay? And buttons on other sites, they don't know what that token is because I'm generating it randomly, okay? That's the idea. So it's a nasty attack and it makes security harder on the web, but it is what it is. And that's part of the reason why like cross-domain stuff is enforced the way it is. It's just because of this weird world of this tab can interact with that tab and cause things to happen. So.
Yeah, because anybody, I mean, you can even create your own form and then just run it on your own site and tell it to submit.
Yep.
And you can even replicate posts.
That's exactly right.
Post all this crap with these parameters and send it.
That's right. You could have a site, you know, we're giving away a free car, enter your name. You click submit on the form, it posts to Bank of America, withdraw money from your account, and If you happen to be logged in and they're not using this request forgery prevention, then it could withdraw the money and send it to somebody. If they know the format of the HTTP inputs, which is easy to find out, we've been doing that all along, right? Open the developer console, look at the form input names. I mean, it's trivial to do, so yeah, you could do that.
So has anybody ever put up a site like, and I'm just going on a little bit of a hack tangent, but if they ever put up a site where it's like, hey, this is some sort of a site, and it's just really attractive, so maybe they offer really great deals on something, and then they get a bunch of usernames and passwords, and then they just test those because so many people don't change them, just test them against banks and everything until they get, I mean, it's just username password acquisition. A lot of people don't.
Probably, that's probably it. Yeah, I would suspect that that's happening. That's a good idea.
That's a good hack.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
That's why I use the password manager.
Generate a random password for every site. You don't have to trust them. Don't reuse the passwords. They'll have to get your email. There's not much you can do about that. I guess you can generate an email that's a disposable email address. There's sites that do that for you. But now most signups for real websites, they know all the disposable email domains and they reject them. So it's the nuclear arms race, right? the spammers are always trying to do stuff, and the anti-spammers are always like, yeah, it's a constant war. Okay.
Thank you for the tangent. That was fun.
Okay, so we want to add. Let's close all these. Okay, so day 2, we'll create a new folder. We'll call it OAuth example. So this is the OAuth login flow. OAuth is also used to make API requests, and there the OAuth is meaning not necessarily on behalf of a user. It might be a service account like we did with the Google API, but it's the same protocol definition for how that authentication happens. It's using OAuth to do it, OAuth 2. But we're using it for a different use case now. So let's make a login.go. Oh, I forgot the app YAML. Paste that in there. OAuth example. Init. So HTTP handle. Let's go to /login. And so now since we're going to line up third party, the distinction between login and sign up is kind of meaningless because we don't have to. Basically, the idea is the first time somebody logs in with GitHub, if they don't have an account, we create it on our side. And so we don't have to have a sign-up flow, really. We can just have login. You just always log in. So handle login.
What's the difference between, so a handle takes a handler, a handle func takes a handler?
Oh, I wrote it wrong. The compiler would catch it. Handle functions working. So this will have the two cases. If method is post, that means they're submitting the form. Else, but we don't really have that anymore, right? So now it's just write string res and then now it's just a button, right? Actually, let's use a link. Because the link here, where do we get the URL to redirect them to? That's this thing here. Okay. So we could put the link in here directly. Like this. What's more typical, and then we have question mark in the options. What's more typical is to go to a link on your site, then do a redirect from that link, because that code we want to add on the end, we should really do in the server. The code should be on the server and saved with the user session. Okay. So there's like 3 steps here. There's draw the form, they click the button, that goes to a different URL, that URL redirects to GitHub. They click accept on GitHub. That comes back to our page, to a third page that handles the response.
The code is the cross-forgery code
Yeah.
or a different one? Okay, got it.
So let's break that into the 3 steps. So we have /login. So I'm just going to have / be this page, and we'll call it handle index. / let's call it GitHub login, GitHub -login. So here what I'm going to say is /GitHub -login.
Austin's got GitHub symbols. You want your link to look like that?
Huh?
Font Austin's got GitHub symbols. You want your link to look like that?
Oh, right, to make it look like GitHub. And there's the GitHub style guide. I'm sure they have somewhere on their site that will tell you what you're allowed to do with their logo. Companies take that stuff really serious for some reason. The amount of verbiage it's kind of nuts. You guys have seen those before? Brand style guides? Yeah. Anyway.
We've got one at City College, and when I put together the website for Summer Web Boot Camp, the public information officer gave me all kinds of grief about the different logos I was using, the different sizes, and the different colors. I was like, man.
Yeah, that's pretty normal. So if you want to use the GitHub logo on your what do they call it? The AutoCAD on your site, you have to follow their guidelines, otherwise they get upset with you. Okay, so we go to index, we click the link, now we go to /GitHub login, so let's call that handle GitHub login. What do we do now?
Yeah, go to that URL and pass in the
That's right.
parameters.
The URL was this URL. It's a get, so we can just do a redirect. We'll add some other stuff to that. The redirect should be a 3.2. Okay. So I'm going to do a format.sprint. Just so we can build this URL.
I've also seen, I think, some people do it where they create some sort of URL variable, and then there's parameters, you could say add this parameter, it adds them all.
We can see that. Let's do that. U:==. You can do it this way.
Yeah. URL struct.
That's parsing. There's some way to do it.
I think there's an example output right beneath the other example. We can just grab.
Opaque? No, that's if you have some weird URL. There's that word again. That means that it just is not going to process it as a URL. There is some way to do a URL builder, but oh, here it is, values. Okay, let's do it that way. So we say var, it's actually values == make URL.values. I think that's right. Yes. Okay. So URL values, if we go look at that type, that's probably what you've seen. It's a map. It's a map of strings. You slice a string, and so you can do add and a bunch of other stuff. And that can represent our query string, and so that's nice. So we can say values.add, give it the key, and that'll come from the docs. So in here, it says client ID, so we'll give that client ID. And then where do we get that from? We get that from the application we just made, right? So we get that here. Okay. So there's my client ID. And then in a second we'll add all the rest, but the point here is that you'll say values.encode. And that will create the client ID equal that and whatever equal whatever.
Does sprint stick a space between each of those arguments?
I don't think so. Sprint line does, but not sprint.
I see the struct for URL.
We could just print F and then use %s here.
Sorry, what?
I see the struct for URL.values.
It's a map.
It's a what?
A map. A
Okay.
map of string to slice of string. So
Okay.
from client ID to, it can actually have multiple values, but use that just one.
Okay, so we have the client ID. We need the redirect URI. This guy's a little tricky because I have to get the current URL, which is like not obvious. We can get it from the request. I think it's host. Something like this. Okay. The reason I'm doing that is if I'm local, that'll be localhost, and if I'm out on App Engine, that'll be the App Engine. Does that make sense? For the redirect URL. That's the URL they're coming back to.
That's cool.
Something like that. That may be wrong. We'll have to look at it. The scope. So scope. I don't know what that's supposed to be. So let's go look it up.
Brushing your breath.
I don't think you need any scope if you're just authorizing them.
User. Let's get the user's email address. That sounds useful. So we just add that to the list. So we just get user email. If we wanted more, we'd have to separate them with a comma. Said that here.
Is that the thing where we're asking for permission?
Yeah, that's what you're asking. The information you're allowed to get from the GitHub API. And you will do so on behalf of the user when they log in. And so you'll make requests to the API and you'll say, on behalf of this user, I would like to find out this information. And it uses the scopes you asked for when you did the login to allow it or not. So it's part of that token. It says what you're allowed to get. Okay? It restricts your access. You can't do anything on the user's behalf. So by adding user email, the only thing I'm allowed to do is get the user's email address. I can't create a repository on their behalf. I can't do anything like that. But that's what the scope is.
What do you think, I mean, what do you think about these OAuth type logins? I've also heard it referred to as federated login.
Yeah.
What do you think about them in terms of like user experience or just, I mean, common practice for web development?
I mean, I think it's far better for the user.
Is it?
I would prefer to have most sites I wouldn't have to enter a username and password because I can't remember passwords.
Yeah.
Do you use them?
Yeah, I use them all the time.
What do you use, Twitter?
No, I usually use Google
Google?
because that's what I'm already logged in.
Right.
But the downside that people don't like is that it means your identity is held by one company. I don't like that. So there was a competing standard. It's basically dead. It allowed you to do your own OpenID, but nobody does that. Everybody lost. Get Google one, Facebook one. So now we have given all the responsibility for users to Facebook because Facebook knows everything about you. So it's easier just to.
You stood up your own encrypted note server. You can stand up your own OAuth2 server.
Yeah. But the issue is that most sites don't support it. They only support
All right, certain.
Google,
Right, yeah.
Facebook, GitHub. Anyway. No, we often use this if we already are going to need to get their GitHub, then it makes sense to do it this way. So if I'm Gitter and I make chat rooms for GitHub repos, of course I'm going to log in as GitHub users because as part of that logging in as a GitHub user, I say, and give me your profile information so I can get all the list of your repository history. So if you're going to do that anyway, might as well.
Yeah, it makes sense in that.
Well, and you also don't need the repository name. You need to confirm that you in fact own it, so you can be admin of that chat room. and
So-
stuff like that.
What do we do for state?
Just generate a random thing, which
How do we generate a random?
UID.
It's just
BP4.
funny that we're now using this on every single example. Okay, let's see what happens.
But you need to store that for when they come back.
We are going to need to do that.
Yeah.
Log in with GitHub. You see where it took me?
Error redirect.
It took me to astute curve app spot, because that's what I set in here. And notice also that the error it gave me was redirect URI mismatch. The URI must match the registered
Which
callback.
is giving you that because you 404 the page they were supposed to go to. Is that why it's giving you that?
No, it's because I said redirect to localhost 8080, but here
Oh,
it's
okay.
set as astute curve 180.
Okay.
So I'll change it. I don't know if this will work, but I can try.
Well, that won't work.
There we go. Now we're in business.
No, it's the same error.
What did I send it? Maybe it'll tell me. Well, but it's the error on my local host now, so it did redirect to the right.
I need to add some logging. So I don't know what this was. So let's save it as a. So let's just do localhost 8080. It might have just said localhost or something. So let's try that again. There we go.
GitHub example 1, if you would like to permission access your account, all it can see email addresses, read only.
So I click authorize, and it sends me back to the
To callback with this code and this state. That's the state we generated. Make sense?
Yes.
So now we're at OF2 callback. We need to do something with that information. So we have GitHub login. We need another one, right?
So I will copy that.
All right. So what do we want to do for our OF2 callback? So we went to login, that redirected to GitHub, they clicked authorize, and we came back. So now what
You
do I
want
do?
to read that key or code or whatever. you
Yeah,
got?
so I'll need the state and the code.
So I have those two things. Those come from the query string. That's what GitHub sent to us. We need to confirm that the state matches the state up here.
To do that, we have to have a session.
Okay? Because I have to store this state inside the session so that I can match it down here. Remember that? So,
Just use memcache. Yeah. I'm just going to copy the sessions we wrote earlier. I forget, when did we do that? Right here. Which is called Oauth. I think that's what it's called. Yeah. So now we'll have ID, and we'll just call state string.
But otherwise, we'll do all the same stuff we did before, okay? So we're just gonna save it in here. So all I did was change what the session holds. I think maybe we'll add email too, okay? So ID is the session ID, and then state and email are things we want to store in the session. And so we got that saved, and now we can just use it here. So when I create the ID here, after this, I need to do two things. I need to create this app engine context. And then I need to get the session. So session, get session. And then I need to save it into it. So I'll say session dot state equal ID dot string, and then put session back. So now I've saved the ID into the session, and actually I think I'll probably do that last. Okay. So save the session. Okay, so that'll save it in the session, and then down here, I can check it. So I'll do the same process. I'll get the context in the session. Now I have a session, and now I can check. So if code or state, if state not equal to session state, then I know there's a problem. That means maybe I was a victim of hijacking or the session got deleted or something happened. So if that happens, we'll just do error. It's invalid state. Yeah, maybe 401. I don't know. Some error. Invalid state. So now we're checking that the state stayed the same. And now all I have to do is use the code. So let's just print the code for now so we can see it. So to redo that process, there we go. That's our code. And we can use that code to ask GitHub for a token that we can use to make API requests. So we exchange this authorization code for an access token. I'm not exactly sure why there's a two-step process, but there is a two-step process. Probably because in order to get the token, we have to use our client secret. And so it's doing another level of, so the first step is the authorization of the user, and this step is the authorization of the application. So some other person can't make API requests using my code. They have to use their own. That was part of the original request up here, the client ID. Okay. So we have to post to this endpoint. If we post to this endpoint with this data, we will get back a token. And then using that token, we can make requests to GitHub. Everybody following so far? Which we'll do in a second, but for now, I want to finish up what we're doing here. So the reason we have a token is if we wanted to request stuff from the API. But if we're just doing logging, maybe we don't even have to do that. And so that process would be, so normally maybe we use that token, I'd say get the repos or get their commit log or something like that. If I'm just doing the logging, maybe all I do is ask for just their email from the API. Okay? And so even though if I'm not going to use the rest of the API, I might just use that one endpoint, just get their email. But we still have to go through this process of exchanging the tokens. Let me look up something real quick. Somehow I doubt there's a pre-canned GitHub in here. Oh my gosh, look at that. So, package GitHub provides constants for using OAuth to access to GitHub. We could use this library instead, if we wanted. And it would do all this work for us. But I'll show you the manual way. Remember this library that we used in all of its painful glory? It's the same process for GitHub. It's just, we create a client with a token source, and it would
Do OAuth 2 authentication. So we need to get that token. So to do that, we call this endpoint. So let's create a function, get access token. It's going to take a context, and then it's going to take our code, so, and return string error. Okay. The idea here is that we'll use this function to get our access token, which we can then use to make API requests. So how do we get an access token? We make a post. So we say URL fetch .client context. And then we say client.post. And we'll give it some data. One sec. There's actually a client post form, which makes this a little easier. And this takes a URL. The URL I got from the API, that's not the right URL. It's this URL. Without the post. So I got that from their docs, and then the form is another values. So we'll build it the same way, like this. So we're building it the same way that we did before, and then we'll pass it in here. And it will put that as a form in the post request, just as if you were posting from a form, and which will give us what we're looking for, I think.
79 should be value or values?
Plural, thank you. So we need the client ID. The client secret. The code. We have the code. The redirect URI, we don't need that. And then the state. So the unguessable random string you optionally provided in step 1. So let's add that to it. We have that in the session. Which I didn't pass in, so. Okay. So that's going to give us a response and an error. And the response, what does it look like? It looks like this. The response will be take the following form: access token equal. This is done.
Or you can adjust it to JSON and below.
Oh, if we have a different accept header? Well, which do we prefer? But I think this is easier because then we just do rect form value. Because this is a request, this is the form multi-part, or not multi-part, URL encoded. I don't know, we could do JSON. Well, we'd have to create our own request if we did JSON, because we'd have to have a header called accept an application JSON. Let's just see what we get back. Okay, so the way we're going to use this is we say access token, get access token, context, state, code, and that gives us our access token. Or sorry, it also returns an error. So that's error.error. So this time, let's print out what we get back. This isn't the access token, but it will be in a second. But for now, so we fill in all these form values. I forgot to fill them in. So we'll fill that in. pass in the code in secret, and then we call post form, so we post to their API, and we'll get back a token. So let's see what happens when I do that. Cool. So there's my access token, okay? Now I need to get it out of the body, and I can use, I think, a URL.parse, that values down. So in here somewhere. I could have sworn there was one on the response somewhere. Yeah, I don't know. I could have sworn there was a to process the response from the. Does anybody remember how to do that offhand? I don't know. We could
Process
do
the
it.
response.
Yeah, to like decode URL values. Maybe I'll just do a search on. No, these are all making values. I want to decode them.
That, the URL value type didn't have it? That package, the URL package?
The net URL values got a parse query function.
Oh, okay. That's so you would do that with parse query. Yeah, that'll work. That's right. Okay.
That means parse query string, right?
Yeah.
That'll give you that type of values, just like you used up above for,
And that value is a slice or something?
it's a map.
Yeah.
It's actually the same type as we used up in line 82 for.
Yeah, makes sense.
Didn't work. Oh, it could be that it. Well, no, it would return an error if it was a bad response. I'm wondering if you use the same code twice, it might not work. But let's see. We should look up parse query to make sure that that's right.
Yes, you know.
That should work. So maybe it's returning an error. I don't think it is. Unless it's the access token is, no, it's access underscore token. Get no feedback here. Let me try it from. There we go. Okay, so maybe you just can't use the code twice, but so that's the access token. So now we have the access token, and we can make calls to the API using the access token. The way that works is it's described here in their docs, and so they have all these endpoints you can use. And so let's see, there's a users one, user emails.
list email addresses for a user. So you can use OAuth with the user scope to get user emails, and that would give you back their email address. So let's see if we can get that to work. This is described in the overview of how you do the authentication. Somewhere. Oh, here it is, OAuth. Here we go. Get, and then access token equal at the end. Or you include it in the authorization. So maybe we'll do it that way. I don't know. We can do it either way. So what that means is we can do get/user/emails !access token equal and give it that access token, and that gives us their email. Okay, so let's make another function. Email string, and that will give us string and error. Sorry, it doesn't take email, it takes the access token. And so we do client URL fetch .client, and then client.get. Give it the URL, which is, we go to the overview, it shows they all start with this. We've done this before with the Markdown example. They start with this HTTPS API/users. Oops. So that'll be that. And then the next part is /users/ and the username. That's not what we want though. We want the emails. Oops. Just /emails. I guess nobody on GitHub can be called emails. That's kind of funny. So that will give us the emails. We just have to add token equal the access token. Okay, that gives us a response, an error. No. Okay, so the response has, it's going to be a JSON, okay? And so it tells us right here what it'll look like. So I'm just going to copy that and then make a variable called data. It's a struct, and then it has a format like this. So it's actually a slice of struct, and each one of those has email, string, verified, bool, primary, bool. Okay, and then I just decode that using JSON.new decoder, hand it the response.body, decode into the data, and then we maybe get an error from that. If there is an error, return it, else return data.email, and no for the error. Okay. So the only thing missing here is if they didn't have an email. I don't know if that could happen. Maybe we say if the length of data is 0, then return an error. But so. No email found. Okay, so the way this works is we do a GET request to the GitHub API, and we pass along this access token that we already got, and that will go get that email as this JSON object, which we decode into the data here, and then we return email. Okay, so if I call that up here, email error, get email, context access token, then that should give me the email. And if I just print that, we should get the email address. So what I'm going to do is go to the root URL again, click the button, didn't like the JSON for some reason. Did I look at this wrong?
I'm not sure the API URL is correct.
That could be wrong, yeah.
I think
I'm missing a V something in there, maybe?
Well, I think it's, you flash off it so quick, but it might be user instead of users. No, it is users. Okay.
Yeah, it says /user on the
Yeah.
list email addresses.
Yeah, it's
Ah.
slash user instead of slash user.
Thank you. Let's try that again. There we go. Got my email. So we could use the GitHub API to get information about users, okay? So the process was, we have a form or a button or anything. You click the link, we go here. This link builds these values that the API expects. We then redirect to the GitHub login page. That eventually comes back to here. We pull out a statement code, validate the state is the same. Then we swap the code for an access token. And then we use that access token to get an email address. But we can call any API method on GitHub with that access token, and then we just print it out. So normally the continuing flow here would be, now that I have an email address, I associate it with this user. So I go into my, everybody had a profile, user profile. I go see if there's a profile for this email. If there's not, I create one. And then I would store that in the session, right? I might say session.email equal email, and then save that session. And now every subsequent page, if I redirect to the dashboard or their home page, I can get out of the session their email address, and then anything I want to associate with the user, I key to that email address. Okay. The process was, how did I know who this user is? I didn't accept their email address. I didn't let them input that into a form because I can't trust them. Instead, what I did is I used GitHub to validate the email address for me. Okay. So I redirected GitHub. They clicked OK, and then I asked GitHub, what is this user's email address? And that's how I got the email. And so the login was done by GitHub. Okay. But this is secure. I can depend on that. I know it's a valid account.
Is that really how those work? Instead of getting a login from an Auth 2, they get a token. Well, they get a piece of info about the user from the API, and then use that as the user key.
I mean, I could use as part of the, GitHub probably has a user ID or something.
Well, but, I'm just asking if this is actually how it works. And I never thought about it, but what happens when you change your email address on GitHub? You no longer have a login here. You've lost the key. That's a headless account with that.
Yeah, there's other user information that we could use instead of getting.
The thing you use to look up the user, the token or whatever,
Access key. Yeah, you can go store that.
is that going to change, or is that always going to be the same?
You could just get /user and it would return you all of this.
Right, but the thing you use to look up your email address, is that always going to be the same for your account? Or is that?
/user/email? Yeah, that'll always be the same.
No.
Yeah, the token.
The token.
Oh, no, the token changes every time you log in. But it's associated with an authenticated user. So if I did get /user, I could use this ID instead. Or this login. So instead of using their email, I could use their username. If I wanted. I just showed you the email. The benefit of using the email is, say I log in with Google and then I log in with Facebook. How do I know those two accounts are the same thing? If I use your email, I can know that it's the same person. So maybe we store both, we store all that data in our database. I've noticed on Stack Overflow, it supports multiple login methods,
Right.
and all of them key to the same account, so it all ends up working the same. So any questions about this process? Okay, so the exercise, which will start and finish after lunch, is to do the same thing using a different third-party login provider. So you could use Google or Facebook or Twitter.
It looks like Twitter's based on OAuth
I think they ditched that a while ago. So let's just suppose we had Twitter.
I mean, it's not in the auth library, and then if you read it, it says based on auth 1. I'll Google sign in with Twitter.
Sign in with Twitter.
Yeah.
They did kind of ditch some of this stuff.
So first paragraph. I got a different page.
But
Overview.
anyway, I mean, it doesn't matter that much, because how you exchange the tokens and all that kind of stuff might be slightly different, but the same basic flow is happening, right? Twitter, you'll redirect Twitter to some page that shows this thing, they click sign in, and then Twitter sends you back some other data. And you can use that data either to swap out like I did for a token and then make a request, or maybe it sends it to you directly. If it sends it to you directly, then you take out one of the steps, okay? But the exercise is choose one of these guys. Choose Twitter or Facebook or Google or one of these sites and try to implement a website that does third-party authentication. Okay? So I will upload this example, but I think you can use it as a to show you how to do that. Okay? Any questions?